For most people, relationships are built on the idea of mutual love, trust, and support. Welcome to Emotional Shadow, but what if that's only half the story? What if every relationship, no matter how healthy it appears, contains a hidden battlefield, an invisible war where partners unconsciously fight for emotional dominance? The truth is far more unsettling than the romantic narratives we cling to. Emotional power is always shifting, always influencing, and always determining who feels valued, who feels insecure, and who quietly controls the emotional climate of the relationship. Most couples never realize this battle exists until it's too late. And the deeper truth is that the fight for emotional dominance doesn't start in the relationship. It starts long before, in childhood patterns, psychological conditioning, and a need for emotional survival that follows us into adulthood. To understand how this hidden battle operates, we must go back to the foundations of emotional theory. Early psychoanalysts, like Alfred Adler, and later attachment theorists such as John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, reveal that all humans develop internal strategies for getting closeness, attention, and emotional security. Some become pursuers seeking reassurance through connection, while others become withdrawers, maintaining distance to protect themselves. But what most people don't know is that both strategies are forms of emotional power. Pursuers try to pull the emotional center toward themselves. Withdrawers attempt to control it by withholding, observing, and choosing when closeness happens. These patterns form long before romantic relationships begin, and yet they become the invisible structure of every partnership. The origins of emotional dominance begin with unmet needs. A child who grew up fighting for attention learns that emotions are tools. A child who grew up walking on eggshells learns that silence is protection. A child who felt powerless develops early strategies to create a sense of control, sometimes through approval seeking, sometimes through rebellion, and sometimes through complete emotional withdrawal. These early blueprints later express themselves in adult relationships, where each partner brings their past into the present. When two people come together, their emotional strategies collide. One person tries to lead with affection, the other tries to lead with distance. One uses vulnerability to gain closeness, the other uses defensiveness to avoid being controlled. And these opposing patterns set the stage for the rise of emotional dominance within the relationship. As the relationship deepens, emotional strategies become more visible. Small disagreements turn into subtle power plays. One partner begins to dictate the emotional temperature, deciding when conversations happen, when conflicts resolve, and when affection is shared. The other partner slowly adjusts, sometimes without noticing, until their emotional reactions begin to revolve around the moods and behaviors of the dominant partner. It doesn't always look toxic. Sometimes it looks like one person always apologizing first, always initiating conversations, or always regulating harmony. Other times it appears as one partner subtly shaping decisions, controlling when intimacy happens, or using withdrawal to punish without confrontation. Emotional dominance rarely looks dramatic. Instead, it grows in the small moments, the quiet shifts, the invisible negotiations that occur in daily interactions. The breaking point comes when one partner realizes they are no longer responding from choice, they are reacting from pressure. Emotional dominance becomes visible the moment a person begins to lose authenticity. When they change their tone to avoid conflict, when they silence their needs to maintain peace, when they start walking on emotional eggshells, not because anything was directly threatened, but because the relationship's emotional power structure has already been decided. These breaking points often trigger confusion, resentment, or emotional distancing, and ironically, both partners feel misunderstood. The dominant partner feels unfairly accused. The submissive partner feels unheard. Both feel trapped in patterns they never consciously chose. As consequences set in, emotional intimacy begins to erode. The partner who feels dominated loses emotional safety. They become guarded, careful, overly agreeable, or quietly resentful. The dominant partner, whether they realize their influence or not, begins to sense the shift and often responds with even stronger emotional tactics. Guilt, defensiveness, or withdrawal attempts to fix things frequently fail because the real issue isn't communication style, timing, or misunderstandings. The real issue is the power imbalance beneath the surface, a silent hierarchy formed through years of unnoticed emotional reactions. Couples try apologies, promises, temporary compromises, or emotional resets. But unless the underlying power structure shifts, the cycle repeats itself. In modern relationships, this unseen battle is intensifying. Studies show that couples today face higher emotional expectations than any previous generation. Social media amplifies insecurities. Individualism increases emotional independence, and constant comparison creates unrealistic standards for emotional expression. In this environment, emotional dominance becomes easier to hide but also more destructive. People now use subtle manipulation tactics without even recognizing them. Slow withdrawal to gain compliance, exaggerated vulnerability to get reassurance, selective silence to maintain control, strategic affection to reinforce dependence, or emotional overload to avoid accountability. These patterns repeat across relationships because most people aren't aware of them, yet they shape communication in profound ways. The result is a cycle where emotional power remains unspoken, yet deeply felt. Arguments repeat because the real disagreement isn't about the topic. It's about who controls the emotional direction. Conflicts escalate because silence or anger is being used as leverage. Disconnection grows because neither partner understands the invisible tug-of-war beneath their conversations. The communication breakdowns that follow aren't random, they are predictable consequences of unbalanced emotional power. Once this imbalance forms, the relationship loses stability. Trust weakens, intimacy declines, and both partners become trapped in roles that slowly suffocate their emotional freedom. The first major takeaway is that emotional dominance is almost always unconscious. Most people don't intentionally try to control their partner. They simply use the emotional strategies that once protected them. Understanding these patterns is the first step toward equalizing the emotional landscape and restoring balance. The second takeaway is that emotional power shifts constantly. No one stays dominant or submissive permanently. The balance changes depending on vulnerability, stress, insecurities, and life circumstances. The healthiest relationships are the ones where partners stay aware of these shifts and actively work to share emotional responsibility. The third takeaway is that communication mastery begins with emotional regulation. Before you speak, react, or defend, your emotional state decides the direction of the interaction. Learning to manage your emotional triggers is what prevents manipulation, intentional or brings clarity to the conversation. But even with all this awareness, there is a caution worth remembering. Love is fragile when emotional power goes unexamined. When one partner unknowingly takes the emotional lead for too long, trust quietly fractures. The relationship may still look functional, but the connection begins to hollow out. To protect real intimacy, both partners must look beyond their words and into their emotional patterns. Only then can love grow without hidden conditions. If this exploration of emotional dominance opened your eyes in any way, make sure to follow the channel, leave your thoughts, and dive deeper into the emotional and psychological truths behind modern relationships. Your awareness is the first step toward breaking the invisible patterns shaping your connections.